Good day, guys, and welcome to this episode. So, this is lecture 2 of the series, right? So, this is our lecture 1 file. We will just come here and create a new file for lecture 2. So, I'm going to be naming it lecture2.py, right? So, in this episode, we are going to be discussing data types and variables, right? It might be a long video in the real sense because there's a lot to talk about, but I'm going to make it as short as I can, as short as possible. So, firstly, let's discuss data types. So, data types are basically types of data, like data types of data, right? So, as you are going to be writing Python code, we have different types of data from string to integer to float, complex, then list, tuple, range, dict. So let me just like get this down and we'll talk on each of them. Okay, so these are the four types of, these are the four, let me say category or four basic category of data types that we have in Python. So the first one is str, which stands for string, right? So let me put it in brackets, sorry, I cleared it by mistake. So the full meaning of str is basically string, which is, a word. A word is basically a string or a group of characters is what you call a string. So when you have my name is Vicol, the combination of my name is Vicol is a string. Even independent words on their own. My name is Vicol. Each of the independent like the four words in that sentence, my name is Vicol, are independent strings on their own. But you can have as much as plenty characters that can make a string. So my space name space is space Vicol can all be one string. All right. So that's basically what string is. And string is of the text data type. So if you want to type texts in Python from a single word to multiple words to sentences, you are going to use the str data type, which is the string data type. All right. Now on the next line we have int, float, and complex. So these are classified as numeric data types. So they're classified as numeric data types. And what are numeric data types? So the first one, int, stands for integer. The next one, float, is also basically floating point number. And the last one is complex, which we know as complex numbers. All right. Okay. So in front of this, let me just give some examples of texts of string. Sorry. So we have Vicol is a string. Python. If you want to type something like Python in Python program, Python itself as a word is a string. And let me also cite my example. My name is Vicol. The string. Now I want you to note something. As you can see, me giving examples of all of these independent, strings that I'm separating with comma, putting them inside of a double quote. As you can see, this thing right here is a double quote. So to declare strings in Python, they must be inside of a double quote. If you have a variable, which we're going to be talking of like later part of the video, and you are storing Vicol in a variable and you want the variable to be a string, do you understand? You need to add the double quotes to tell your program that from the beginning of this double quote, from the opening of the double quote down to where the double quote was closed, it is a string that is inside of it, right? So now let's go to integer. So like I said, int, float, and complex are all numeric data types. Use them to, to deal with numbers, to operate on numbers. So examples of integer now, let me give an example. For integer, we have integers are basically decimal numbers. And what are decimal numbers? Basically numbers of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Integers are basically your counting numbers. So as long as you can find the number among the counting numbers human being use, it's an integer. More like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, down to 100, 2000, 5000, they're all integers. But numbers like 100.2, 500.1, 30.7 are not considered as integers, because you cannot count, like in our world today, you cannot be counting 1, 2, 3, and then you do 3.1, 3.2. No, 3.1, 3.2, or 3.01, 3.02, or whatever with points are actually not, counting numbers. So integers are basically recognized as the normal counting numbers we're used to. So 5, 6, 7, 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 are basically integers. All right. So now me giving examples here for integer, I can say 2, I can say 5, I can say 19, I can say 25, even 10,000, 20,000. As long as there is no decimal point after your number, as long as it's a whole number, let me just put it that way, a whole number, a counting number, it's an integer. All right, so next we have float, which is a floating point number. And basically in mathematics, floating point number are basically numbers that have, the decimal points. So any number that has a decimal point can be classified as a floating Python. Examples being something like, if I have a number like 3.142, which is pi, is basically a float. If I have a number like 9.80, which is gravity, is basically a floating point number. If I have a number like 1.559, these three numbers are basically floats or floating point numbers because of what the full stop, or sorry, the decimal point they have within them. All right, so to declare numbers like 3.142, I need to make sure I'm declaring them as floats. And to declare numbers like 2, 5, 19, 25, 10,000, 20,000, I need to make sure that I know that they are integers. So we also have the complex data type, which is the normal complex number we are used to in mathematics. Complex number that has to do with this vectors kind of numbers. So examples of complex number, we have like 1 and j, we have 2j, 3j. So when you're working on, complex numbers, when you're performing operations in Python and you want to deal with complex numbers, you use the complex data type to specify that these numbers are complex numbers. All right. So now moving to the list, tuple, and the range. A list is basically something that looks like this. Let's say a list of okay, now moving to the list, tuple, and range. A list, tuple, and range are basically under the sequence data type. All right, so there are data types that have data in them, collection of data, more than one or two different datas that are of the same set. All right, so an example of a list, we can have like a list of, let's say, cars. So you can have something like Toyota, comma, sorry, let me take this and put it right here in front of list. Yes, so these three, I said they are sequence or sequential data type. Yeah, sequential data type. They are sequential data types. As you can see, we have a list here, which is a list of cars. All right, so to create a list in Python, you basically open a square bracket, open and close the square bracket, and every thing inside of your square bracket is a member of the list. So now this is a list of cars, and I have them in quotes. Like I told you, we represent texts inside of double quotes, right? So Toyota now is a text because it's a word or like a brand name. Lexus is a brand name, Audi is a brand name. So I inserted them inside of double quotes to tell my program that I have a list of cars, and each cars have strings which represents the brand names for each of the types of cars. So I have Toyota here, Lexus, Audi. So to create a list in Python is very easy. Just open your square brackets, then close your square brackets, and inside of, from the beginning to the closing of the square brackets, you're going to create different members of your list. So this is a list of cars. That's why I have Toyota, Lexus, Audi. And to add more to the list, I'll just add a comma. And like I keep going on and on and on. So long I'm having all of this data that are related, and they are going to be stored inside of a car list. All right. Now moving on to the next, we have something called tuple. All right. So tuple is basically just like a list, but it is declared in a different way. So if you want to declare a tuple, unlike a list where you use a square bracket, the difference between a tuple and a list is that a list is created using square brackets, and every member of the list is inside of the square bracket, right? But a tuple is created using a round bracket instead. So the exact same way we have members of a list, we can also have members of a tuple. And now let me use this one as, okay, let me just do the same thing for car. So I have Toyota. So both of this, all of these things right here, and all of what I had for my list are basically the exact same thing. But the difference is that what your program will see something like this, anything declared like this as a list, and anything declared like this as a tuple. All right. So that is the basic difference between the list and the tuple. But then they do the same function. The hold, or gather. Like I said, it's a sequential data type. So both of them are like a sequence of different related data. Now this is related data in terms of we have a tuple of cars or a list of cars. So they are all related to the class car. All right. So the other one we have is range. And range, like we know in mathematics or even normal English, is more like a bandwidth, or like an area to which something is bounded by. So if you say something is let's say your network speed, and you say the range is from 0 to 1 MB per second, then it means that what your network speed can go as low as 0 and can get as high as 1 MB per second. It cannot go higher than that. So that is what we call range. So range in Python is basically used most times in loops, in for loops, to tell your program you have a range, you have a boundary for a particular value, and then you want to loop through a certain thing to check for that, as much as or as long as that boundary. Now you understand more of these things when we start doing loops, but for now I can just explain range and give example. So to declare ranges, you can just say range and then create and open and close a curly braces and put your number here. So as you can see, even my emet is saying something about range, saying whatever is going to be in the bracket is going to be the what stop, except if you want to have more than even one parameter inside of your bracket. So I'm sorry I'm mentioning big grammars right now. So what I'm saying is a range is just basically to tell your program the bandwidth or the maximum size of something you get. So me now saying range 7 right here means if I have probably numbers I want to declare, it means I'm telling my program that they are going to be of range 7, probably maximum of 7 numbers, or from 1 to 7, and they can't go above that. So that is what the range data type is for. And like I said, it's mostly used in loops. Now loops is basically what we know as like for loop and while loop in Python, where you want to check through something for as long as a condition is true. So imagine we have a range of 7 now, and then want to start from 0. Probably I have 7 people attending a particular lecture, and I want to get their names. So rather than getting their names one by one, I can do a loop that would start from the first person, and because I have maximum of 7 students, I'll tell my program that I want it to be in the range of 7, and then get the name for each of the students until the 7th student. So that's basically how and what we use range for in Python. Now down to the last data type, which is dict. So dict is basically a dictionary, something we call a dictionary. So dictionary, right? And it's a mapping data type. Yeah, it's of mapping data type, and you understand why we classify it as a mapping data type now. So it's a mapping data type because whenever you're creating a dict in Python, it looks more like this. It looks more like this. It uses this what's it called, curly braces, and then you create a variable and you specify the value. So now, unlike a list where I have this as a list of cars, I have this as a tuple of cars. If I want to have a dictionary, it has to be something that would have a value, a placeholder. If you know what a placeholder is, something to hold a value. So I'll first start with like a name as my placeholder, and then I'll give it a value. Let me say Vicol, then followed by a comma, then let's say age, then I'm going to give it a value. Let me say 10, followed by a comma, and then let me say department, and then I'll give it a value of computer science. So now, with this example I've listed right here, the difference between dict now and all of the previous data type is because a dict now breaks down, uses these curly braces to first specify that you are creating a dict data type, and now for each of the elements in a dict you are giving it a value at the same time of declaration. So now I'm telling my program that I have a name variable or a name value in my dictionary, and then the value for the name is what? Vicol. I have age, and the value for my age is 10. I have department, and the value for my department is what? Computer science. So the difference between dict and all of the other data type is that as you are declaring your variable, you're also giving it a value. You're declaring another variable of that dictionary, and you're giving it a value at the same time. Now, how do you give it a value? You use this semicolon right here. As you can see, this dot is what we use. Sorry, not semicolon, colon. Use this dot right here to specify the value. And now let me brush through something again. As you can see, I put name in square brackets because it is a name, right? It's a variable. Name in double quotes, and then the value was also in what? Double quotes, because Vicol is a text, which is a what? String data type, and must be in double quotes, right? Now for the age, specifying the age as a member of the dictionary, I'll use double quotes, but the value, because an age is an integer, like I said, integers are basically counting numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and age falls in that category. Because you cannot have 15.7 as an age, you cannot have 10.2 as an age. It's just either 10, 11, 12, 15, 20, 19, whatever. So given the value for my age, I don't need to add a double quote to it. Alright, so I just left it there as a value to represent an integer. And then my department also, because department is a member of this dictionary I'm creating, this whole dictionary, it has to be in double quotes, and then the value also has to be in double quotes, because computer science is a text, which is a string data type, right? So I think with this I've explained the whole idea behind the 4 major categories of data types in Python. So now I'm also just going to talk on something called comments in Python. So if I try to run this program now, let me right click and then run Python and run in terminal. Now see what happens. We're going to get a crazy error from this program if I try running it now. So if you remember the last time we did in lecture 1, like I said, the first line is going to be the file directory that wants to be run, and then afterwards is the output of the program. As you can see here, it ran a crazy amount of error from line 2 down to line 4. This is because, even from line 1, it has to be from line 1. So the point is, all of these things are basically things I'm just choosing to explain, alright, for us to quickly understand. So there's something called comments in Python, which basically allows us to do the exact same thing I'm doing without affecting our program. Now, the same way we printed something in the last lecture, let me just print Vicol now, and then run this in my terminal again. Run. What will happen is still run an error. Alright, that same error is still here, but I actually want to print Vicol. So the point is, with Python, it allows us to do something called comments, where we can, just filter some part of our code so that our compiler does not read it or our interpreter does not read it. Now the point is, our code reads from top to bottom. Yeah, so before it gets to line 6 to want to print Vicol, it has to read line 1, read line 2, read line 3, down to line 4, then 5 is blank, and then comes to read 6. So that way, if there's going to be an error on line 1, it cannot further process all of the rest of the lines. But with comments, I'm very sure that my line 1 to line 4 was just me trying to explain something to you guys. So I can just add an hashtag before it, an hashtag before each line, an hashtag before each line, hashtag and hashtag. As you can see, even on my VS Code, the text now look very, very faint. That is to show that with the hashtag, I'm telling my program that I'm commenting from line 1 down to line 4. Each and every line I've added the hashtag to, and the comment actually just allows my program to just see those codes, but then it will not read them. Alright, so all my program now is going to do is, instead of the way it's run by reading line 1, 2, 3, 4, just reading line 1, getting errors, and it couldn't read 2 down to 6. Now my program is going to see line 1, but it's not going to run it. It's going to see line 2, but it won't even read it. It will see line 3, it will not read it. It will see line 4, it will not read it, because of I've added this hashtag at the beginning, which is for comments. Now it goes down to line 6, there is no hashtag before it, and it's going to do the exact same thing I wanted to do, which is to print Vicol. So now let's run this now on our terminal. Right click, and you can just click run Python. So now, as you can see, we have our output here, which is Vicol. So that is what I wanted to do, and that is what it did. That is it for this lecture, guys. I really want us to understand data types in Python, and that is why this video is even as long as 20 minutes. So please do well to follow this video through. If you didn't understand anything or you have challenges with anything, try as much as you can to rewatch this episode over and over again so you can get used to it. And after now, we're going to go into the part 2 of data types and variables, which is going to be us talking on variables. So how do we create variables? How do we use variables? How do we manipulate variables? And how do we work with variables in Python? So I'll see you there, guys. Click on the video shown on your screen right now to watch the variables episode.